And yes, for Joseph. Our second speaker today is a speaker from Dallas, and you might know of her. Danny, this flag's beating me up. You might know of her, Ramona Trevino. She is a wife, mother, author, former Planned Parenthood manager, turned international pro-life advocate and speaker. She shares the story of how God's love and mercy saved her from the abortion industry, and her autobiography and her memoir, you might have known or recognized this, is Redeemed by Grace, a Catholic woman's journey to Planned Parenthood and back, which is available in both English and Spanish, and it's available on all the bookstores. And she does have books here today. Some people have asked. Yes, she does. Ramona, I guess she would sign those, is that right? Okay, she would even sign it for you. So help me in welcoming Ramona Trevino to San Antonio. Ramona?
Can you hear me okay back there? A better question is, can you see me okay? Hello, San Antonio. Es un gran bendición y un placer estar con todos ustedes esta tarde. De verdad me alegro por estar no tan solo en el lado de la vida, pero también del lado de la verdad, el amor y la misericordia. Le pido a Dios que después de hoy nos sentimos renovados de nuevo con este fuego y pasión de continuar siendo una voz por aquellos que no tienen una voz. It is a great pleasure and an honor to be with all of you on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. It is truly a great joy not only to be on the side of life, but also to be on the side of truth and of love and of mercy. My prayer is that after today we will walk away with more conviction, more passion, and more courage to be a voice for the voiceless. As you can imagine, there's so much to talk about and so little time to do it, so that's why I had to write a book. In the early months of 2008, I accepted a position as a clinic director at a Planned Parenthood in Sherman, Texas, which is just an hour north of Dallas. At that time, I had no idea that I was going to work for the nation's and even the world's largest abortion promoter and provider. It is no secret that the center that I directed did not perform abortions, but we facilitated in them by referring for them. As a matter of fact, just the other day, I had a lovely conversation with someone on Facebook who said that I had no authority, nor did I have the right to talk about abortions because abortions were not performed at my location. Funny thing is that I've never made the claim to be a voice of authority on anything, nor am I the voice of authority on the inner workings of how Planned Parenthood runs their abortion business. What I can do, however, is present the facts, share my personal experiences, and allow everyone else to make their own decisions based on those experiences and the facts. Regardless, one does not have to work inside the abortion industry to know that abortion kills a human being. And one does not have to work for Planned Parenthood to know that what is taking place is both immoral and unethical. And even in some cases, as we've seen lately, criminal. The problem that lies before us is that despite the testimonies, despite the undercover investigations, despite the lawsuits and even the history of this organization, people will not see the truth because they need to believe the lie. They are being deceived just as I was deceived. They've bought into the rhetoric just as I bought into the rhetoric. I believe that they truly wanted abortions to be safe, legal, and rare. I believe that Planned Parenthood was the champion for not only the underinsured, but the uninsured. I believe that they were a non-for-profit organization that truly cared about women. I believed lie after lie after lie after lie. There's a reason that they don't allow their employees behind the curtain, so to speak. It's to protect themselves from people like me, people like Abby Johnson, like Sue Thayer, and countless others who have come out of the abortion industry exposing Planned Parenthood for who they really are. It reminds me a little of how the Wizard of Oz's curtain was finally pulled back to reveal that he was nothing more than a great big lie and a grand illusion. The people of Oz allowed themselves to be deceived. But we in America, we are saying no more to the lies and the deception. We will pull back the curtain no matter how long it takes, and we will expose Planned Parenthood for who they really are. One example that I'd like to share with you is that, you know how Planned Parenthood calls themselves a nonprofit organization. And yet, if you look closely, their president, Cecile Richards' annual income is well over $500,000 a year. For them, nonprofit is only a tax term. And over again, they will tell me that Planned Parenthood surgical health services, where abortions were performed, were not the same as Planned Parenthood of North Texas Family Planning Services. This was the affiliate that I managed in Sherman, Texas. The reason that I was deceived when working for Planned Parenthood was because I was convinced that the Planned Parenthood that I managed was not in any way associated with abortion. They always told me that where abortions were performed were at the Dallas location or the Fort Worth location, which was Planned Parenthood Surgical Health Services, and that the money was separate, and that there were the funding was even separate. And so in my mind, I was helping to prevent abortions by providing the contraception. I was helping to prevent women from having to go to the abortion facility. I convinced myself of that because that's what I truly believed. And growing up in a world in which abortion was already legal, you grow up in that environment, believing the rhetoric, hearing the lies, and really buying into that. The reason I know that this was a deception was because at one point I realized that money truly is fungible within the walls of Planned Parenthood. For example, some of our patients were post-abortion women who had a post-abortion or post-abortive women. And they had received an abortion, for example, in the Dallas location or the Fort Worth location at the Planned Parenthood Surgical Health Services. So keep in mind that the affiliate has changed since I left. I think now the affiliate is Planned Parenthood of Greater Texas or something like that. But at the time, Planned Parenthood Surgical Health Services was the one providing the abortions. And so if we had a young woman who came into our location who had an abortion at a facility in Dallas or Sherman, we would see her for what they called a post-AB appointment. So it meant post-abortion follow-up. And so, for example, a young woman who lived near Sherman but had to travel to Dallas to get the abortion, she would come back to our clinic to get the follow-up, which would include her pelvic exam, it would include her pregnancy test, and it would include 1 month worth of birth control. And all of these services we provided for free. Keep in mind that the location that I ran was not a federally funded location. And so we charged for every service that we provided. However, in this instance, we didn't charge. When I asked our Vice President of Operations why we didn't charge women for these post-abortion follow-ups, she said, it's a courtesy to service them. We do this as a courtesy to service these women because they've already paid several hundreds of dollars for their abortion at Dallas and Fort Worth. Later on, after we switched over to electronic medical records and software, it became more and more imperative that we did not document in our computer system, especially at the government-funded clinics. It was imperative that we did not document anywhere in the computer system or in their medical records that patients were being seen for a post-abortion follow-up. And Sherman and several other locations had more flexibility because we were not federally funded clinic. So here's my question. If the abortion side of Planned Parenthood that does not receive taxpayer dollars and the family planning side of Planned Parenthood that does receive taxpayer funding, if they're seeing women for post-abortive follow-up, then one might conclude that the money is indeed fungible, that the money is being moved around. And here's the hypothetical that I will give you. Every Planned Parenthood has quotas to meet. Abby Johnson's talked about this. Many others have talked about the abortion quotas that must be met. So for example, even within my facility, even though we did perform abortions, I had monthly quotas to meet. So I had a number of patients that I needed to see each day and to total up for the month. And I had a set dollar amount that I had to reach every day in order to fulfill that quota for the end of the month. So if I'm, hypothetically speaking, let's say I'm seeing all day long in my schedule women who have had an abortion, and they're coming to us and they're coming for free, how was I ever making money? And so I concluded while working there, this is kind of peculiar. Why are we offering this service for free? We don't do this for anyone else. And if they've already paid for their abortion at the surgical service, that's money that is owed to them for that service. Why aren't they paying us at this location for our service to them? So later on, I would conclude that in all reality, they are indeed in the business of abortion, because it didn't seem to matter to them that we weren't making any money off of these patients. It didn't seem to bother them because they were already making hundreds and thousands of dollars off of them for their abortion. Planned Parenthood is in the business of abortion, and it took me a while to figure that out. They're in the business to the tune of over 300,000 abortions every year. And recently, as recent as last summer, when the Center for Medical Progress exposed them for selling baby body parts, Cecile Richards herself testified before a congressional hearing that over 80% of their profits come from abortion. And yet, they receive over 500 million, that's $500 million with a B. They receive $500 million a year in taxpayer funds. You'll appreciate this story if you haven't seen it yet. A few months ago, I did an interview with Lila Rose with Live Action, and it was just released on the internet just about a week and a half ago. You can find, if you haven't seen it, you can find it on Live Action's Facebook page. You can see it on their website probably. I don't like to see myself, so I don't really look for those things. In a nutshell, a few months prior to me walking away from Planned Parenthood, in the month of January of 2011, Live Action, through their undercover investigations, caught Planned Parenthood workers across the country willing to aid and abet in sex trafficking of minors. Planned Parenthood's response to this was that they would retrain their staff on how to identify this type of activity and how to report it. So when I was notified as a clinic manager that we would all attend a retraining, you can imagine how stunned, disgusted, shocked even. You can imagine how shocked I was when I was told that we were not there to retrain on these matters, but rather learn how to identify if we're being videotaped, recorded, and how to handle suspicious phone calls. It wasn't until I watched the Live Action video that just came out that I learned that Live Action actually investigated through the Freedom of Protection Act whether these sexual abuse cases were actually reported by any of these staff members. And I recently learned that out of the 7 clinics that they investigated, only one of them actually reported this abuse to the authorities. I would like to say that I walked out of my job right then and there, just from the pure disgust. At that time, in February of 2011, seeds were already being planted, and I was starting to try to reconcile my job and what I was doing there. I was asking myself questions and really just having the spiritual battle that was taking place within my own heart. I couldn't walk away, even despite attending this quote-unquote retraining and seeing the undercover footage and being told that we're not there to train on how to help these women, but rather how to avoid being caught in these undercover investigative stings. I would love to say that I had the backbone and the courage to walk out at that moment, but I couldn't. I lacked the faith. I didn't know where I would go. I didn't have another job lined up, and I knew that my husband's income alone wouldn't be enough for us. At least that's what I thought. So there I am, hanging on for several more months later. Meanwhile, Jesus is really asking me to surrender, to trust in him, and to take that leap of faith. You know, conversion is a very peculiar thing. It kind of happens in steps. And so when one is being led to this conversion, you initially experience this restlessness and this irritability, and you know that something's wrong in your life and you can't put your finger on it. And that's the way I felt during those 3 years of working for Planned Parenthood, is that I knew something was wrong, and I was irritable, and I was restless, and I couldn't figure out if it was because of my own personal life or if I was frustrated with my job. I just couldn't figure it out. The next step in conversion is that moment of surrender, where you realize that yes, something is definitely wrong in your life, and you're starting to see what it is, and you know that you can't just take that leap of faith, so you surrender and you say, God, you take over from here, because I can't do it by myself. And then that next step is just God and his power. And that's what I truly experienced. And I think that's why it took so long for me to finally say goodbye. That safety net would come in many forms. One of the forms in which I was able to take that leap would come in the form of 40 Days for Life. It was the only ever campaign that was led in front of my clinic, because we ended up closing down after that 40 Days for Life happened. Also, sidewalk advocacy, sidewalk counseling. There was a woman out on the sidewalk who was not even supposed to be there, who God had placed it on her heart to just go out there and be a witness. She'd never been out there. She'd never been in front of any type of abortion facility. And it just so happened that on the day that she was out there, the first person who was supposed to stand vigil in that 40 Days for Life campaign was running late. And so on the day that I took a leap and went out and said, could you please pray for me? I want to get out of here. She was there because she said yes. She said yes to what God was putting on her heart, and she answered that call, and she went out to the sidewalk. Oftentimes I shudder at the thought of what would have happened had she not been out there that afternoon. Honestly, my conversion can be attributed to only God's grace. By the prayers of the faithful people who were out there praying for me for 40 days, not judging me, but loving me out of the abortion industry. It was a combination of me pursuing truth. And you know how dangerous it is when we pursue the truth, because ultimately the truth leads us to He who is truth, with a capital T. And that's what happened to me. A loving, kind gesture from a stranger, the prayers of those at 40 Days for Life, the support of the faithful community rallying behind me saying, take that leap, we're here for you. And finally, my beautiful Catholic faith, the sacraments, and Christ's divine mercy. Because of Jesus' love for me, and his great merciful heart, I was able to confidently place all of my trust in him. And with that confidence, I walked out of there on May the 6th, 2011, and 3 months later, that Planned Parenthood closed its doors, shut down, out of business forever. After I left, I went on to have 2 more children who I know would not be here had I still been working for Planned Parenthood. And every day I look at their precious faces and I look into their eyes and I give thanks to God for all the wonderful things he's done in my life. And I praise him for those little lives that are here today. I can't imagine my life without them. They brought so much joy, and they're such a beautiful reminder to God's beautiful mercy and his grace. I've gone on to publish my book and share my story. I travel and share this story wherever God leads me and lead me to whatever ears need to hear it. I'm working now as a bilingual training assistant for Sidewalk Advocates for Life, but first and foremost, I'm a child of God, a wife, and a mother. So now I'd ask, how can you get involved? What can you do? First, very simple, vote. Vote pro-life. Know, yes, vote on a local level. Know who's running in public office. Know where they stand on the life issues and vote. Second, give of your time, your talent, and your treasure. Volunteer at the pregnancy resource centers. Volunteer in any ministry that you feel you're called to. Offer your gifts and your talents, whatever that may be. And give, if you don't have the time and you don't have the talent, but you have the treasure, give your treasure. I don't know anybody that would say no, right? Educate yourself. It is so important. For me in the last 6 years, it's been such a journey of trying to learn more and more and more about how to defend life issues from the womb to the tomb. And it's always important to educate yourself so that you can defend the cause for life, but always in love and charity. And lastly, be courageous, be convicted, know that what you're speaking is true. And no one can argue with that, right? What's true is true, but do it with courage and conviction. You know, in those final days before I left Planned Parenthood, before I found that final, just that courage to walk away, not knowing where my next paycheck would come from, not knowing what would happen to us with really no job lined up. It was really these words from, and I'm borrowing this from the lady on the radio, Catholic radio, Barbara McWigan. She said these words that really changed me forever. She said, at the end of our lives, we're all going to stand before God. And he's going to ask us, did you know about abortion? And I'll never forget that this was just days before I took that final leap out of Planned Parenthood, and I'm listening to the radio and I'm hearing these words. And as she's saying this, I'm no longer hearing this woman on the radio, but rather I'm standing before God. And so she's saying that when we meet our Maker, we're going to stand before him. He's going to say, did you know about abortion? And here I am sitting in my car and I'm in tears. And I'm thinking, yes, I knew about abortion. And that God is going to ask you, did you know that babies were being ripped from their mother's wombs limb by limb at the rate of over 3,000 a day? Did you know? And I began to cry and weep. And I thought, yes, I knew. And then he's going to ask us, he's going to ask you, he's going to ask me, and what did you do? And that was when it hit me. I was going to have to say, I showed them the way. I facilitated in their deaths. And for those 3 years that I truly believed that my hands were clean because I didn't work inside of an abortion facility, I was going to have to try to reconcile that before God at the end of my life. And I think, my friends, that that's the biggest struggle that we face in this culture, is that so many people believe that this is not their issue. So many people say silly things like, if you don't like abortion, don't have one. But it reminds me of the time, and I don't know how many of you have heard this story about the Holocaust, when the people in the church are hearing the train pass by, and they're hearing this train full of people crying and yelling, and they know that these people are going off to the death camp to die, to be gassed. And the people in the church sing louder to drown out the sound. How many of us, and this is why I thought the statement of, well, you don't have a right to talk about abortion. You don't, what voice do you have? This is why I find this so silly. It doesn't matter where I worked. It doesn't matter what I did. I knew. How many of us know? How many of us know that it's happening and we sing louder? We go about our lives so that we don't have to think about it. And yet at the end of our life, we're going to have to explain that I knew and I did nothing. Before I go, allow me just to part with my favorite verse from Psalm chapter 107, verse 1 and 2. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His mercy endures forever. Let that be the prayer of the Lord's redeemed, those redeemed from the hand of the foe. My friends, the foe was Planned Parenthood, abortion, and all those things that we turn our backs on. I've been redeemed from the hand of the foe, and believe me, I am grateful. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you so much. What a great, inspiring story. Thank you, Ramona. You know, if you don't know, what Ramona mentions here is so true. If you don't know about San Antonio, the city of San Antonio, this is Dream Week. This is Martin Luther King Week. In this pamphlet I hold up here, our city government sponsored Dream Week. And I go through here and show you Planned Parenthood has 3 different events they sponsored. One was Nasty Women, and then 2 others, I forget what they are. But Planned Parenthood was let in the front door of the city of San Antonio during Dream Week. How absurd. And if you think about it, and if you don't know, a lot of Jewish people fund Planned Parenthood here in San Antonio. One of their events was Remember the Holocaust and the Holocaust Museum. Now, how twisted is that? I don't have to remember. We're living the Holocaust today here in San Antonio with abortion and Planned Parenthood at 2140 Babcock. So you need to be aware this takes place every single day in this city, and we have got to change the culture.